Hey everyone, welcome to September Live Q&A session for the Injured Athletes Club. I was just typing that in right into the little title of the live Q&A, and I couldn't even believe that I was typing the word September. um, sorry for the little delay. We're getting started a little bit late. I forgot I have to use a different browser in order to get the live Q&A to work for me. So hello and welcome. And hopefully some of you will be trickling in. We're starting a different, we're trying out different times to see if these different times work for you guys. And also letting you know what topic we might be talking about to see if you guys like knowing what the topic's going to be for the day. We'll always defer to the live questions that you guys have coming in with things that are on your mind right now, the biggest things that are on your mind and the things that you need support with and the burning questions that you have. But we like to have a topic too, just in case. So today, our topic is talking about fear of re-injury. And I'm joined by Cindy as well. Hi, Cindy. So if you pop into the group, tell us hello, say hello in the comment box there. Yes, last time for those of you who watched, last month we were together in Chicago because Cindy and I were working together on our big project that we're working on. But this time alas, I'm in California and she's in Chicago, so we are not together, unfortunately, for this one. But I was saying, like, man, why can't they there's gotta, if any of you guys know this out there, if you know the answer to this, I'm gonna have to do a little research. I feel like there's gotta be a way to, like, split the screen and we could both, even though she's in Chicago and I'm in California, we could both be on the screen at the same time. And I personally wanted to do that today because we realized we're both wearing almost the exact same outfit. So I wanted to be matching together. I don't think Cindy likes that idea. So today the big right. So today the big topic, and I chose this as the topic for today. I mean, there were a few reasons. This is a big one for a lot of people. I mean, it's one of the biggest, when I'll do this like kind of anxiety pyramid with my athletes that I work with as they're recovering from injury. We look at like all of the things that, anything that just produces a little bit of tiny butterflies in the stomach, a little bit of nerves, all the way to the main one at the very top of the pyramid. And usually I'll tell you the main anxiety producing factor, the main anxiety producing event that is at the top of that pyramid is fear of re-injury. So not only, did I choose it because it's a pretty pervasive fear that people have, but we also had a couple people comment on it in the Injured Athletes Club. So I don't know if you guys saw the post from Chloe. Chloe is joining us from down under, as she says. I'm going to assume that's Australia. So Chloe is joining us from Australia, and she shared a little bit of her injury story. And one of the things she posted, said in her story was that she's terrified, was the word she used. She's terrified of getting injured again. And then I think it was Nina that said that also when I said what we're going to talk about fear of re-injury today, she said that fear of re-injury is so real, and it is real. And it's real for an important reason. So we're going to kind of talk about like why that happens and why it's really important to address it. And also talk about different things that you can do to help build up your confidence, which sort of combats the fear, right? Like as you're confident, it's like, if you're holding on to fear and confidence at the same time, as your confidence goes up, your fear is going to go down, and vice versa. So sometimes, it can be helpful to think about it that way, not like, how do I stop being afraid? And maybe instead of thinking about it in terms of how do I stop being afraid, is what do I need to do to boost my confidence? Because that's naturally going to tip the scales for you. So definitely, as come say hello in the comments. I see that there's some people joining us, and then definitely write your questions in the comment box as we because we always want to defer to your live questions, the things that are on your mind right now. So if you have questions, definitely put them in the comment box, and we'll get to those questions. Sometimes they don't pop up for me, so if you see me grab my phone, that's because I'm trying to see if you guys are making comments on there. So there's a few concerns that I see athletes have when they're coming back from injury, right? Or kind of early in your recovery process. There's a few concerns that I see that are pretty pervasive among all athletes. And one is like, am I going to be the same athlete? Like, am I going to be able to come back and perform the way that I did before I was injured? So that's one main concern. Another main concern is feeling like you're losing fitness when everyone else is gaining. Is a tough one. And that one's, for me, that one's easy. I mean, it doesn't feel easy when you're going through it, but it's like that fitness comes back. Your fitness is going to come back. It might not come back as quick as you want, but it will come back. So that's another concern that people have, is like, oh, I'm losing fitness while everyone else is gaining. And then the big one is fear of re-injury, is that like intense feeling of vulnerability. So it's not just like, oh man, I don't want to deal with this again. But for some people who experience this fear, when I say it and when you think about it for yourself, it's this very visceral feeling inside of you of like, close to panic, I would say, almost. And people will experience this at different levels. And maybe we'll talk about panic a little bit, because one of the reasons it's so important to talk about this and to address this, if this is happening for you, this fear of re-injury, is because what's happening is if you're feeling it in an intense way and triggering your stress response, that fear of re-injury actually will make it more likely that you will in fact get injured because of what some of the consequences are of triggering the stress response. So when you trigger your stress response and you feel that fear in a way that has a physiological impact, you can lose your peripheral vision. It makes it difficult to make decisions. You lose your coordination and your balance. So all of these things that are really important when it comes to optimal performance, and also being able to, see your environment and make decisions quickly in order to protect yourself, right? So it's really important, if you're experiencing this, to figure out how to boost that confidence and work through it, so that it doesn't become something that sort of takes your head and body out of the game, so to speak. So one of the things that's really important here, I'm jumping on my phone just in case. I want to make sure none of you are typing in live in questions. I don't know why it doesn't allow me to do this, but let's see. So you guys talk amongst yourselves while I look and make sure it's all good. I'm teasing. Let's see. It's not showing me live. So hopefully Cindy can, if something pops up and I'm not asking it, Cindy will text me. It's good to have a teammate that way. All right. So there's a few different things that you can do when it comes to this idea of fear of re-injury. And a lot of this is, it's smart to be building these skills up and thinking about it now, before you're getting cleared to return to high intensity and to competition, so that you're really building this skill set as you approach that time, because it does, have a tendency for some people to ramp up a little bit as you get closer to the situation that may be similar to the one in which you were injured, right? So this is all going to be different depending on what your injury is and how you sustained it. But say, if you got an injury during a competition and other people were involved, as you get closer to that particular situation, you might have a heightened state of that fear of injury. So building some of these skills leading up to that will become really important, so that hey, welcome, nice. So it's important to build that up as you get to the more intense situation. So it's just like your physical skills, right? Like, in order to call on it in the moment that you need it, that's a skill that needs to have been developed. So going through injury and working on these mental skills, it's really kind of a beautiful opportunity to work on some of this stuff that's going to continue to serve you. So one of the things to know is that if you're experiencing this fear of re-injury, it's your brain's trying to protect your body. So we're wired this way to it's like your brain is letting you know, like, hey, guess what? It turns out we're vulnerable and we can get injured. And so we want to pay super attention now from now on, because we don't ever want that to happen again. Right? But the way your brain is doing that is sometimes in an overactivated state, in a way where it actually ends up being detrimental instead of beneficial, right? So what you want it to do, like what we want our brains to do, is to sort of perk up your ears and go, hey, pay attention, because we don't want this to happen again. So let's be really smart. And instead, it takes you, kind of to the extreme. So one thing that's really important through this whole process is to keep talking to yourself. And what I mean by that is, so one of the things, we trigger our stress response when we feel like we're not capable of handling the situation in front of us. And so sometimes the thought patterns and the automatic thoughts that come in that situation, they're automatic. So your brain is picking up on things in the environment and putting things into action before you even process really, like, can I handle this? What's amazing is that part of your stress response, whether it's getting triggered or not, and what direction, whether it's working towards, because we always want to be in a homeostasis, right, inside of our body. And so whether your body is working you towards like relaxing or getting you amped up has to do with the thoughts, right? So if you're in a situation and you're triggering the stress response because you're like, oh man, I don't know if I can handle this, talking to yourself and talking yourself through it triggers the opposite. It brings you back to that homeostasis. So, and it's almost like talking to yourself as if you were, in a way, like you're talking to a scared child, right? Like, you can do this, you can handle this, you got this. It's normal for you to be afraid. You've done the work. I know you can do this. So sometimes you have to actually like continue to talk yourself through it in that way. That's one way of sort of talking yourself through it, and keep talking to yourself and making sure that you're feeding that other side. The other piece is you can also, one of the things that happens when you trigger that stress response and that fear of re-injury is your focus is all internal. So all of your focus is up here and worried about, really absorbed with the fear of like, oh my God, I don't want to get injured, instead of your focus being external on being able to read the cues and know what's happening and know what you need to do in that moment. So even using your self-talk in a way of directing your focus and directing your thoughts on where you want to be focused versus where you don't want to be focused. So this is a really big thing with this idea of fear of re-injury, is really thinking about that idea of focusing on what you want versus what you don't want, right? So a lot of times we tend to focus on something that we don't want that is more of a motivation that's driven in fear instead of a motivation that's driven in desire. So for example, if you're thinking to yourself like, oh man, I don't want to get injured, we don't even process the word don't, right? You just go to injured, and there's all kinds of thoughts and emotions that come up with that. So when you do that, when you're thinking to yourself like, I don't want to get hurt again, I don't want to get injured, there's a certain energy that comes with that. And so you really want to think about focusing your energy in a way that is more facilitative and positive. So focusing on what you do want, like, I want to come back strong. I want to be even stronger mentally and physically coming back from this. I want to build from the ground up and really feel rock solid coming back. That is a much different energy than like, oh God, I don't want to get hurt again. I don't want to get injured again. So thinking about what you want versus what you don't want. Yes, exactly. So like it's very similar to self-affirmations. So it's two. There's the self-affirmation of like, affirmations are very strong, powerful, positive statements as if something's already true. So those affirmations would be like, I'm strong. I've done the work. I can handle this. I know that I can do this. They're affirmations about you. And then you can also be thinking about, and what is it that I want versus what I don't want. So there's a couple other pieces in here that are helpful with this. Another really great mental training tool for dealing with the fear of re-injury is, that idea of like, if we're building up our confidence, that it's like, if you build up confidence, just the natural consequence is that fear is going to get less. So one of the ways you can build up your confidence, in addition to the thoughts you're feeding yourself, is also using simulation training. So simulation training is creating situations that are similar to your high intensity situations, or some of the situations on that anxiety pyramid where you start to feel like, oh, I don't know if I can handle that, and creating situations to practice that and to practice building your confidence both in your body and in your mind. So, and doing it in a way where you can start to build that confidence up slowly and be exposed to those situations before you get into competition. And the reason that's important is because you don't want the first time that you're facing that, because your brain is so adept at picking up some of those cues in the environment and going like, whoa, this is feeling familiar. This is really similar to where I was injured before. And what your body wants to naturally do sometimes is to brace against that, which sets you up for potential injury. So you want to be able to practice these, create simulation training and practice some of these situations, as close as possible. It's not going to be quite the same as being in competition, but as close as possible to those competition situations so that you're building it there. And that the first time you're exposed to that isn't in competition. And you get to practice not only feeding your confidence with your ability and feeding your confidence in trusting your body part, whatever your injured body part is, but also seeing yourself going through those situations feeling confident. And so, so an example might be with my cyclist, like say that you're coming back from an injury that was sustained during a bike crash. And maybe on your anxiety pyramid, one of the lower ones, it might be like riding outside, right? Like I'm totally fine on the trainer. Riding outside maybe just like produces a tiny bit of anxiety. And maybe if the crash happened on a descent, maybe that's somewhere in the middle. Like now riding solo on a descent feels a little bit more anxious. And then maybe riding in a pack on a descent is a little more anxiety producing. So you're creating situations where you can have the opportunity to practice that before you get into competition. So an example would be, taking two of your trusted friends or teammates and the three of you riding together on descents and practicing times where you're a little bit closer in proximity and then further away. So you can start to build up the confidence. So that's just one example of simulation training. So for you, you can think about like, what are those situations that I might put on the anxiety pyramid, right? What are the things that just produces a tiny bit of anxiety? It's not that much, but a little bit of butterflies, and start there and really start. I mean, it's almost like you're building if you're experiencing this fear of re-injury, you're going through your rehab, you're building your body back up, right? In a way that's like, so that you really trust that body part. What you're doing with this is the same thing with your confidence. It's building slowly back up, right? So it's like if you have a calf injury, you're not going to right away go out and go for a 10-mile run. You've got to build the strength back up. The same thing happens with your confidence. So sometimes there's injuries where you come back right away and you don't have that hit to your confidence. Other times that's not the case, and it can be different between injuries. And so it just is, for some reason, sometimes something gets triggered into the brain where it hits that vulnerable piece of you where in your fragility, all of a sudden you're like, oh, your brain just gets overactivated, and you just have to work a little bit more deliberately to then build up the confidence as well. So as you think about this pyramid and creating like, well, what are other simulation training ideas I can have where I can slowly build that confidence back up? The other thing you could do with this, another mental training tool for you, in addition to building up your confidence with the simulation training, is also with this pyramid, you can use visualization to see yourself in these situations performing with confidence and feeling. So not just tapping into seeing yourself successful, but feeling it. Like actually see if you can tap into what does it feel like in your body. So not just emotionally, what does it actually feel like in your body when you're feeling powerful and strong and confident and solid in your performance, and see if you can tap into that feeling as you visualize yourself going through these different scenarios successfully. So it's this idea that you got to be able to see it in your mind before you can see it in your life, so to speak. So, and when you do that, you're literally building up the neural pathways that are the preparatory pathways as if you were actually doing it. So if we go back to that scenario of the cyclist, like, so say you're working on that descending with a couple of different teammates that you trust, right? And that's something that makes you a little bit nervous right now because of a crash and an injury that you had. So when you visualize that and see yourself doing that and see yourself doing that successfully, you're using some of the same neural pathways as if you're actually out there on the bike with your friends. The only difference is that the motor skill is blocked, but all the preparatory pathways are exactly the same. So you're literally practicing and building this neural pathway and practicing how you want to feel in that situation. So visualization can be a really powerful tool coming back from injury in a lot of different ways, but especially with that fear of re-injury. So the stuff that, and it's important too to kind of figure out, well, what's underneath that? Like what is that fear that's there? And it's, is it, I'm afraid that I'm not going to perform to my potential, that I'm going to hold back because I don't want to injure it again, right? So there might be a couple different fears there to tease out. Or is it, I don't think my body's ready? And sometimes, sometimes that's a voice that's worth listening to. And if you have that voice, it's worth talking to your athletic trainer about why you're feeling that way. Because, sometimes it might just be that you need to hear something that you haven't heard in particular from your, healthcare providers, your medical team, or your athletic trainer, or your orthopedic surgeon, or whoever, that even though you've been medically cleared, there's still this like little voice in the back of your head that's hesitant and that's questioning and that's wondering, am I really ready? And so sometimes it just might be that you need to ask that question and hear it explicitly in those words from your trainer. So don't, feel empowered to ask that it's okay for you to say, I would like for you to tell me why you think I'm ready to go back, and sometimes you are, a lot of times we're physically, with all of our advances in treatment and technology, it's kind of amazing. Like sometimes we really are physically ready before we are mentally ready. And so I have had some athletes where we work through, maybe it's worth putting off their return, even though they're physically ready, until we build their confidence back up because of this potential for re-injury when you actually are experiencing the fear of re-injury. Because you're eliciting that stress response, it becomes very important to work on this part of your performance because of that. So I want to make sure, I know I've been jabbering on here. I want to make sure if you guys have any questions, definitely shoot a comment in there if it's something about this whole idea of fear of re-injury, or if you want advice on like, well, how do I deal with this situation? Or if you want ideas on how to do simulation training, like whatever your questions are, definitely pop them in the comment box there. I know, yeah, it's a very common thing to deal with, but it's also not everybody does. And I think it's important to point that out because to know that if you do see somebody else that's going through a similar injury and they're not experiencing, like, they know, like, I've been here before, I know I can handle it, I know I just got to do the work and come back and I'll be able to come back. They might just be going through that process a little bit quicker, or for whatever reason, the way that they were injured didn't trigger that protective response in their mind. But don't feel like there's something wrong with you because you're experiencing that. This is very, very normal. And I would say the majority of athletes that I've talked to and worked with on coming back from injury, at some point, that is a thought in their mind, is that fear of re-injury. But a lot of times as their confidence comes back, that, that starts to dissipate, that starts to go away. So any burning questions you guys have? Oh, let's see. Oh, look at that. Hey, Carla, welcome. I think Carla's one of our new members, if I remember that right. I'm glad you could come in. And Jasmine, awesome. Hi, guys. Oh, yeah, it's so good to see you guys. I know, I feel like we could talk about fear of re-injury every time, probably. And we won't, because, there's so many topics to talk about when it comes to injury. But man, it's, what's really interesting, I'll say this, like, this protective mechanism, like, just know that that's normal, because even when when I was injured, so I went through two different knee injuries, one before I was studying sports psychology, and one that happened, this was years ago now, but it actually happened while I was in the middle of my master's program studying sports psychology. And I said to myself, oh, I'm going to use this as an opportunity. I am going to come back and kick some ass. Like I'm going to use every tool in my mental training toolbox to work through this injury. And it was phenomenal. I can't even tell you what a difference it was between those two. And I did all of the work that I needed to do to be confident. But still, that very first time I got on the chairlift. So it was I snowboard, and it was an accident that happened snowboarding. That very first chairlift ride, I still ignited that stress response, but I had the tools to deal with it. And I knew exactly what I was going to do to work on it, but it's still there. So it's normal for that to happen. So let's see. So simulation training in real, like on the bike, for example, or inside. Can you explain more? Yes, yeah. So I'll give a couple other examples. So this one's not necessarily injury related, but it's a different type of fear. But sometimes this one helps people figure out like, what could I do to do simulation training? So I've worked with a lot of triathletes on fear of open water swimming. And one of the things that we'll do sometimes for simulation training, so it's in part with this one, it's I want them to get into a situation where it's similar to what they're going to experience during the race, and be working on the mental training tools to be able to calm their body and calm their mind and work specifically on some of those things. So for example, I might have them go out with to somewhere where they can do open water swimming with a really trusted friend, and have moments where their friend will swim over them. So one of the fears is like, somebody's going to swim on top of me, and what if they kick, what if my goggles come off? What if, so you're thinking of all the what ifs, like what if this happens? What if that happens? Or even with some of my triathletes that are nervous about changing a tire, changing a flat in the middle of the race. One of the ways I'll do simulation training with them is have them take an extra tube, and the next ride, one of the it's like your very own inaction clinic, right? So one of the things they have to do is stop in the middle and change a flat. Even if it's not flat, they just do it. So their brain gets the message like, oh, I can handle this. Like I can do this because I've done it before. So that's the message you're trying to get to your brain with this simulation training, is like, oh, I know I can do this because I've done this before. So say, if you're maybe you're a soccer player, or you got injured, or you're softball or baseball and you got injured sliding at some point, right? So there might be a lot of anxiety the first time you go to slide. So are there other, how can you build up different scenarios that are close to that to start building the confidence? So, another one with on the bike in particular, since you're asking about that, I mean, sometimes what I'll have my cyclists do too is even my professional elite cyclists, sometimes after an injury, if this has been ignited in a way where that fear of re-injury is pretty big, especially after a crash, I'll have them go out and do a skills clinic, or create their own. Like take a couple, and we'll work on like, well, what would that actually look like? What are the different drills I would do? And what would the bike skills clinic actually look like? And it's just going back to the basics and making sure that you remember, oh, I can do this. I'm an expert at this. But sometimes you just have to remind your brain that, because it's in such this protective state. It's almost like it reverts back to being a novice again. And you have to remind yourself, I'm not a novice. But sometimes you have to be deliberate about it and like go do the bike skills clinic, or go, set up whatever the simulation training is in order to build that confidence back up. Yeah, great question. Awesome. So we're about to wrap up. Any other burning questions? I'll stay on for a couple more minutes. If anyone else has another burning question, type it in the comment box there. Yeah, I think so as I wait for any other burning questions, just know for yourself that you can work on your confidence and these mental skills just like your physical skills. And really, when you're attacking it at both ends, like you're building your body in a way that's making you feel more confident in your injured body part. And even asking your athletic trainer, like as you're doing your rehab, like, how is this helping me get stronger? Like, how is this helping this area exactly? You know, knowing the specifics about that can sometimes feed your confidence and feel really good. So, you know, knowing that I'm building my muscles back up. I'm building my tendons back up. You know, you're doing what you need to do to heal your bone, whatever it is. You can do those same things for your brain as well. And when you're doing both of those things, I mean, when you know, and that was the biggest thing I got from that experience of going through this with my while I was in my program. I knew definitively I had dotted every I and crossed every T. I did everything I could to come back optimally from this injury. There was no question in my mind. So when you do that for yourself, man, I mean, it really does, you set yourself up for success. And you also have the tools in your tool belt to be able to know what to do in a situation where your stress response does get triggered. You know how to handle it. So it's not that it's not ever going to not get triggered, right? But it might be less likely to get triggered when you have these tools, and you'll know what to do. You'll know how to handle it. Awesome. Yes. Right. I know. So Cindy, I don't know if you guys saw that last comment here. Cindy says she's going to use all of this in her marathon this weekend. First one back after my last foot injury, right? We are all going to be rooting for you, Cindy. That's going to be super exciting. It's right, big milestone, the first one back. And right. And I'm sure, look, I'm gonna like it too. I don't know who just liked it. Oh, nice. So thanks everyone for joining us for the live Q&A. Join us once again next month in October. We'll send out a little date to let you know when we'll be doing that. And I'll pick a topic to talk about, but always come with your burning questions. Tell your friends. We hate that they might be injured, but if they are, please share this with your friends. And definitely keep reaching out to the group for support. I love seeing your comments on there. And keep, sharing your stories and sharing your successes. And Cindy, I expect you to be giving us a race report in the Injured Athletes Club and let us know how it goes. Yes, Carla, absolutely, my pleasure. So thank you, everyone, and we'll hopefully see you next month. Bye, everyone.